morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Rise and shine. It's a beautiful Wednesday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. Very important. And Kairi Okikelu.
Kairi, get over it. Good morning and welcome to Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. I'm Malkwe Ogun Yusuf.
It's hard to get over it. The truth is the truth.
Let me just leave it there. But you know, there is a particular capital that is important, and that's the capital of the people, where they, pitch their tents in this matter. I think that's what's important. Ultimately, whether it's Lagos, the commercial capital, or Abuja, the political capital, it's all about service to the people. And what's one of the issues that's being rampant these days is consumer rights protection. I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday we had that conversation with the FCCPC CEO talking about one or two issues. It just raises a question on our minds of how do we even know our rights? Sometimes we don't even know the issues to raise when our rights have been trampled upon, Kadi.
Absolutely. And, the theme for this year is Consumer Rights Day. It's celebrated or commemorated every 15th of March, is Fair Digital Finance. I hope I got that right. Yeah, Fair Digital Finance. And it's on the back of the numerous text messages, WhatsApp messages, phone calls, by the way. So I think it has graduated to phone calls from, these loan sharks, they call them. And they call you and tell you your associate or your family member owes a certain amount of money, and the person is a sabotage, all of that. Essentially becoming a nuisance to you who didn't actually, you were not involved in that, you didn't even sign up to that. There are questions about, rights, definitely. But of course, your details that are just, taken willy-nilly, as they say, without your approval. And I imagine how much of my details are in the hands of these people. I can begin to extrapolate what that means, really. So it's a lot around it. FCCPC got court order. They try to clamp down on some of these unregistered loan companies and all of that. But it's important to, keep this conversation going on. Because even for the head of the FCCPC, Mr. Rukera, he says he's gotten those messages. And just yesterday, I was just with someone who got a call. No more text messages, and that's just one of several instances of, consumers and their associates this time around, their rights being trampled upon. I don't want to get into, how governance is also a service. So, we consumers also need some sort of protection and all of that. But today it's important to, pay attention to the rights of consumers. You're consuming one thing or the other per time and ensure that you're getting value for your money, because at the end of the day, it is money that you're using to get that service or that good. So ensure that you get value. If you're not getting value, there avenues to seek redress. It's important to do this, not just for you, but for people coming after you. Because if you drop the ball and say, what, that's what they do, they don't know how bad it will be for the next person. So we pay attention to that this morning, and we thought, to let you know. Malkwe.
Well, I do not know if it's, obviously the Consumer Protection Agency has told us that they are not, that this is not allowed according to our laws, and this is prohibited. But I think that people need to get wiser than, going to loan sharks, because if you didn't go to them in the first instance, they wouldn't be displaying your information. Even though I have seen situations whereby people's details were stolen. I had a friend whose phone was stolen, and so were her details, because her organizer was also stolen alongside the phone. And, the person who stole her phone got sufficient information about her in her organizer to be able to do things with her phone, such as, taking loans indiscriminately from loan sharks. And so before she knew what was happening, she was having to, when she retrieved her line, she was having to pay back loans that she didn't know anything about, just so that, her details don't go viral. It was a very embarrassing situation. So there could be instances like that where, there are exceptions. But I think that generally people should avoid as much as possible loan sharks. I think that a lot of banks these days are willing to give people soft loans if you have a credible means of income. I see that some banks are becoming rather aggressive about telling you to take a loan. And you know what they do? They time it with festivities. For instance, Valentine's, I can't even count how many offers of loans I got from a bank. But like, even if I want to take a loan, will it be for Valentine's? Bank, calm down. Anyways, that said, talking about consumer protection in general, I really do feel very sorry for the Federal Consumer Protection Council agency. They have a job of work on their hands, and thankfully for them, they have at the helm of affairs somebody who's truly concerned and passionate about the job which has been given to him. Even though many times, I mean, I've spoken to him on set and also behind the scenes, many times he does get discouraged by the lack of encouragement. And then when you look at the plethora of challenges that Nigerians in general have in terms of the services that were given, the goods and services that were given. Let's talk about services. Look at what is currently happening with petrol prices, for instance. Should we be in this sort of situation? How does the Consumer Protection Agency protect us from our own government, which is in charge of petrol, ensuring that we have sufficient petrol? How does it protect us from a hike, for instance, in fuel price, in aviation costs, for instance? I remember that just last week, the House of Reps committee, I think it was headed by the Deputy Speaker, and they were having an investigation into what is going on in the aviation sector. And, the FCCPC was invited. They, also got, they got some flack in that particular committee meeting, even though they were trying to explain themselves. The plethora of things coming at us generally as Nigerians, you talk about it many times, the sort of services you receive, the quality of goods, the nonchalance that comes alongside, that, the fact that, customer service is still at an all-time. Maybe a few organizations understand what customer services are, some others don't, or maybe they're grappling with it. That environment needs to change. And I think that it's going to take more than the Consumer Protection Agency to change that, even though, yes, it could start with them. So we'll encourage them not to get discouraged. We'll also encourage people not to sit on their rights as much as possible. I remember, in the days when before Twitter was banned, they were very active on Twitter. They didn't, if you laid a complaint and you tagged them with it, they would as much as possible look into your complaint. Well, now Twitter is back, thankfully, so we assume that part of their service will start again. Do not sit on your rights as much as possible. If you have been given crappy service anywhere, there's a whole day to celebrate what is rightfully yours. So as much as possible, try to seek redress. And I know that a few government agencies as well, such as the NCAA or so, in certain areas, they also have specific responsibility to you, when you have been shortchanged or when you feel shortchanged by the service that you have received. Do not sit on your rights. As much as possible, stand up for what you believe in and try to seek and get redress. Gentlemen.
Most of the time, the challenge really is us testing the law. Remember that lawyer who took the VIO to the Vehicle Inspection Service to court, and today we know what the result of that is. I think what's important here is to raise the issues for us to know what's important. The three things come to mind for me. Number one, Kade, you talked about the fact that, even governments, they are service providers, so rightly so. That's why they have Servicom. How effective is Servicom? When you go to a ministry, department, or agency, you don't get the kind of service you expect. That's the job of Servicom to take on. Question then is, are we, as Markwe asked, taking advantage of the instruments of government available for us to take on these issues and ensure that we get the correct service and redress where necessary? We've spoken about all of these issues now. And as Mr. Irukera said the last time he came, the job of consumer protection is not just for one government or any government agency, it's for all of us. Because on the one hand, you are a service receiver, you're a customer somewhere, but you're also a service provider somewhere else. So ultimately, it's all of our responsibilities. And as Markwe finalized, test the laws. You never can tell. You could get redress, so don't give up. Let's switch to the papers now and tell what they have on the front page.
Resuscitate moribund refineries to boost availability, FG urged. And you see last year's trade deficit hits 1.94 trillion naira. That's 96% higher than that of 2020. Essentially, we imported way more than we exported, thereby not getting as much forex as we ought to. So, I mean, you put all of this together and it's no-brainer why all of these figures point to that. But then some of these issues raised are no-brainers as well. Refining, not just petrol, not just diesel, not just kerosene, even aviation kerosene or ATK or aviation fuel. If it's refined in-house, then we wouldn't have all these challenges we're having with, you know, the landing cost is this is how much it's being sold. It will be sold essentially in naira.
Essentially, you're saying our production capacity dropped in the year. I mean, if we produced more and are able to export more, add value to the things we produce as opposed to exporting raw. Remember that headline?
Oh, yeah.
That's where we are. Because the question is, I don't know what the question is.
No, really, a lot to chew on this morning, a lot to chew on. There's politics as well. And you know, my challenge is that they're not really sinking. Politics and the policies, as it were. It would seem as though they're in two different worlds entirely. You see, APC convention, Buni's team returns, takes charge in Abuja. I sincerely hope we don't lose sight of, you know, very important things. You know, the president did say that this is not important to the people. But, you know, to the players, that's what they're doing right now. I heard a governor saying they're all moving to Abuja, you know, just to... Some will say, well, you're already in Abuja anyway from now. So it's important to pay attention to those issues, which are, you can see on the front page, the big ones, even as politicking goes on the sidelines. But let me shock you with this one. Only 4 doctors available to every 10,000 Nigerians, FG. Jesus. Well, maybe some people aren't shocked, but I'm sure some people are shocked. It's a page 4 read.
But you remember, was it yesteryear or the year before that we had that interview? It was in Abuja. Makwe was taking on the Minister of Labor and Employment and was saying we had more than enough doctors. What happened?
Well, I don't think 4 is more than enough. Well, except there are different definitions of more than enough. But it's a page 4 read. Perhaps you get the definition of more than enough in that one. Let's leave it there for the Guardian newspaper. I should say it's quite a heavy one this morning. A lot of issues, I imagine. Let's leave it there for the paper.
The Vanguard newspaper this morning is also interested in the same issue, energy. And it leads with this one. Energy crisis, OPS, NLC, reps, others warn. Local refining, the solutions. I think, you know, you looked at the same crystal ball this morning. That's according to the OPS. Nigerians can't continue like this, NLC warns, says there's limit to what people can tolerate. Hand over moribund refineries to IOCs, reps tell FG. Decry 778 billion naira operating loss. And so many, it's all right there on the front page, including these ones. Several flights cancelled as aviation fuel scarcity persists. I'm wondering how that tells on the economy. We can only release number of flights cancelled, delayed after quarterly meeting with stakeholders. That's according to this NCAA. Find the details on page 5 of the paper this morning.
There's another way around that. Get the consumers. I mean, it's Consumer Protection Day. All right, let's have a portal where you can actually just input the flight that has been delayed or cancelled. That's a faster way, right? Because it's happening to me right now. It's important to have these on-the-spot details so we know what to do, so we don't, well, you know what.
Well, we'll talk more about that later this morning, hopefully. Fuel scarcity in Bayelsa, talking about the energy crisis. That's what the picture on the front page is about. Long queues of vehicles as motorists notice the presence of fuel tanker entering into a filling station. That's it. The APC story is also the APC crisis at Panodo retakes National Secretariat. We're not aware that Panodo has resumed Bello's camp. That story is on page 7, and the details there. Above the nameplates, and this might be interesting, Obaseki Wike rift forces PDP to shift NEC meeting today. Okay. 2 major houses. All right, the story is on page 6. Check the details there. The back page has sports, World Cup qualifier, GFA awaits CAF verdict on Cape Coast Stadium, and a number of others that you will find interesting. Mr. and Mrs. So Mr. and Mrs. seem to be having a conversation. So Mrs. says, looking away from Mr., whatever you must have taken, whether it's energy drink or aphrodisiac of any kind, is your business. Henceforth, I don't want to be disturbed when I'm sleeping. And Mr. says, what is this? Subsidy removal?
There you go.
That's the Vanguard newspaper this morning.
Well, it is what it is. Daily Trust has this on the front page, talking about politics now, away from energy crisis. APC crisis, Boni's camp bounces back as activities for convention begin. Party pegs chairmanship form at 20 million naira. Secretary, 10 million naira. Lawyers bicker over representation as court decides suit tomorrow. Confusion over NEC meeting. That is also on the front page of the Daily Trust. You also have a few other stories here, but look at the second leading story. Aviation fuel selling at 670 naira per litre as marketers, operators fail to agree. Airlines insist on price reduction or bailout. Senate begs operators to withdraw shutdown threat. Yes, that threat was issued, was it yesterday, that they only have 3 days left to keep operating till they shut down. 3 days. Excuse me. Well, you'll find all the details on page 25 of the paper. And then some more politics for you. Presidential race, we're not troubled by Oshibajo's ambition. That's from Tinubu's camp. Blackout worsens as power grid collapses again. So if you had light before and you don't have now, this is what has happened. In less than 48 hours, there's been a second grid collapse. Page 4 will fill you in on the details. So let's take a look at leadership and what they have on the front page. They have this: PDP NEC to produce schedule for party primary. That is just on top of the lead headline. As Buni finally takes charge, INEC confirms attendance of APC NEC meeting tomorrow. So politics is taking the cake on the front page of leadership as well. Party pegs chairmanship form at 20 million naira. Drama in court as lawyers fight over representation in APC suit to vacate court order. Why we're training convention protocol officers. That's from Ganduje. No. The core members you see there are not the protocol officers. Those ones are the members of the NYSC during the passing out parade of 2022 Batch A Stream 1 at Kubu Orientation Camp yesterday. So those are core members who are participating in their own POP, as we call it. You also have this: Nigeria's 2022 budget deficit may hit 10 trillion naira as oil exports drops. So we have to ask big questions. Now that oil prices are well above $100 per barrel, is that when our oil production should be slumping? big question. But this is what we're doing now. It looks like we're going to borrow more money to be able to, make the difference between what we're importing and what we're exporting just for, consumption. Very worrying situation. Page 7 will give you all the details. You have some stories on the corner, but take a look at this one's on top. 20 bandits, 3 policemen, 4 vigilantes killed in Niger attack. The security situation in Niger State continues to be in focus. Amechi opposes 12% NIMASA revenue for maritime varsity. That is also on the front page. Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
And turn our attention to the Nigerian Tribune. And, it's politics for the Nigerian Tribune this morning. PDP may die if it loses 2023 polls, Atiku warns. Says he denied Tinubu VP slot in ACN. Dokwesi raises alarm over plot to deny returnee PDP members party ticket. Ayu PDP governors wade into Obaseki Wike crisis. So this is a focus on the main opposition party, the PDP, this morning. Page 2 has more details. And you see that picture on the front page. Sharing news. 18-year-old Nigerian emerges overall best in 2021 WAS with 8 distinctions. By the way, is it WAS or WAS? I've never really gotten that term.
In Nigeria that has so many consonants, you just say HESC. So,
people say why, but that's the body itself, not the examination. But you know what? WASSCE. There you go. Congratulations to the young man emerging overall best. It's a page 30 read. Of course, you have the APC leadership tussle. Niger governor retreats. Akpana Doede resumes at party secretariat. Just on top of the nameplate, an update on that petrol souvenir story. Police arrest a rain party organizer. I think that was it 2 days ago? Page 27 has more details this morning. So I know there's been a lot of debate, so it's at the court now. Let's see how that one goes on that story. There's the blackout story. National Grid suffers second system collapse in 2 days. And sports on the back page. World Cup playoff. Okoye is sure bet against Ghana. We're counting down to that all-important match. It's on March the 25th. Talk about the march on March the 25th. So all the best to the Super Eagles.
Nigerian News Direct is interested in a probe of 2.6 trillion naira unremitted funds. Reps begin probe of 77 oil firms. Stories on page 3. Threaten arrest of defaulters. Project fund recovery for debt servicing. That would be nice. Stories that's ascribed to the Speaker of the House and several others on the front page. Anti-Corruption Commission. Sanwo-Olu appoints Olatoregun as chairman. Well, Oyo State has an anti-corruption agency, so now Lagos. And I guess we'll see how it all goes. Okay, so that story you referenced earlier, I think, on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Energy cost. Naira devaluation. Others push inflation rate to 15.7%. Seems the vehicle is speeding up again. That's the Nigerian News Direct this morning.
Well, next up is New Telegraph. Take a look at the front page. APC leadership change drama ends as Akpana Doede returns. So, looks like the New Telegraph has seen the script of this one, saying it's ended. Says Boni remains chair. Musa Al-Makura Mustafa each pays 20 million naira for chairmanship form, and a host of other riders. I think we have, dealt with that one as well. But see, this one on the strike. FG ASU should find common ground to save our children. Elders. Obi sues for greater government investment in education. But I see that point where we call the students, children, our future and all that. But essentially they are paying for a service. And there's, as much as there's the government-citizen relationship, there's also the consumer.
I was gonna go there.
They need some protection. They've paid money. It's a contract, as it were. And if someone is reneging on their side, and I think we should seek, I mean, some sort of redress to this one, because there are now 3 elephants, no more 2 elephants fighting and the grass suffering.
It's a major issue, and I hope we are really considering bigger issues there. Daily Times newspaper has this one on its front page. Of course, it's something we talked about. FG to borrow more to fund petrol subsidies. Described to the finance minister. Says financial mechanisms needed to strengthen inter-regional trade. But above the nameplate, and this should be interesting, agriculture will boost Nigeria's IGR if, as ascribed to the vice president. Find out the details. Continues on page 2.
And that's where we leave it for a look at the dailies this morning. But that's not all. We have a big package for you this morning. We're starting with the much talked about energy crisis. So please stay with us.
Fixing the nation's power challenge has been a revolving subject over time, and the Minister of Power, who was guest at this week's ministerial briefing, begins by affirming a total of 8,000 megawatts of power consumed daily. He acknowledges an enormous decay in the sector, which he says is currently being addressed. One of the immediate concerns, however, is the challenge of metering.
We are working assiduously to ensure that all locations in the country are metered through the National Mass Metering Program. Discos that fail to perform will be sanctioned.
The minister insists that meters are free and will not tolerate meter racketeering.
These are the tools that will generate liquidity. How can we be selling something that will bring in the money? And it is the responsibility of the discourse. And the government is seeing that they are not doing it. We are not just folding our arms, but we are doing a lot to ensure that that stops.
In 2021, reports showed that about 6 million Nigerians are unmetered, and that figure has hardly changed, according to the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC. The ministry is looking to train about 5,000 meter installers, preparatory to the second phase of the National Mass Metering Program, gulping over 200 billion naira towards the distribution of 4 million meters.
As you now enumerate more customers, you now put them along in the numbers that you have as unmetered customers.
The Power Minister also explains the erratic power supply currently being experienced in Abuja and other parts of the country.
From the low capacity of the hydro water in the dams and the challenges we're having in the repairs currently undergone in some of the generators. So this causes all these power outages.
Thank you, Ministers.
Improving on the nation's epileptic power supply clearly transcends beyond mass metering, even though it is a significant step forward, but it also involves the attitude and actions of the discos and the TCNs. As a matter of fact, the Minister of Power has promised that the 40 billion naira debt owed the discos by the MDAs will be paid this month, expecting improved service delivery across the country. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
So at that time, the Minister of Power said it was issues with generation, hydro, and some generators. So that was much earlier on. But of recent, we have seen 2 power grid collapse. So that's the transmission end of it. And I won't even get into the challenges we've had with distribution companies. So it's a challenge along the whole value chain, as it were. And just to get a sense of how we can get out of this, because if there's anything we have grappled with in this country for so long, it will be electricity supplier. We're joined, as you've seen, by Dr. Ayodele Oni, who's a partner energy practice group at Bloomfield LP. He's also a commercial lawyer. He joins us virtually this morning on the program. Dr. Oni, thank you for joining us. I want to ask how you've been grappling with this, power supply and all of that. But on a general front now, is there really a straightforward answer as to why Nigeria has had to endure years, decades of poor power supply and across the value chain? I mean, from generation, transmission, and distribution.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a hydra-headed problem. You've had that problem, mismanagement for several years. You've had a situation where you've had insufficient investments over a long period of time, until between the last time you had any major grid enhancement before the mid-2000s was 1987. And you can imagine what the population was then and what the population was in 2010, 2012, thereabout, when you began to have major improvements on the grid. So if you look at the problem, it's across the value chain. And you could put them in buckets. You've got the technical, you've got commercial, you've got the disco issues, you've got even economic and issues around implementation and even the regulator. And I can discuss each of these issues. So it's not just one problem, it's a suite of problems and issues around mismanagement and not properly maintaining infrastructure and even insufficient infrastructure. For example, the grid collapse we've had, a number of reasons can be adduced for this. First, low frequency and the fact that you have majority of the power plants in the south and you don't have sufficient power or power generation from the north. Even the power generation in the south is epileptic. So it begins to affect the system. You also have the problem with even the SCADA, what's known as the Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition System and the ENS. In every system, you need to monitor. You need to be able to anticipate that there may be a challenge. But because we do not have sufficient infrastructure, the SCADA is almost non-existent. And for a while, government has been speaking about buying a new one or replacing it. So before there is a grid collapse, before there's a problem along the network, they are supposed to see that through the SCADA. You can remotely monitor. So there are several issues and we can discuss them one by one.
Dr. Oni, is to find out exactly where this all started from. There are those who are referencing as far back as pre-privatization. There are those who are saying, well, the real problem we wanted to solve, these are some of the problems we wanted to solve when we moved NEPA into PHCN and then the privatization program and the restructuring of the power sector, so to speak, that we have, right now. So perhaps by way of backtracking, was the privatization issue a mistake, or was it something that we didn't get right from the very beginning? Should government, I don't know, as you said, it's a whole lot of issues, so one is just wondering, by way of backtracking, did we make a mistake privatizing? Or is it that it's too early for government to hand off completely?
No, there was no mistake privatizing. Now, the problem is, for me, the way the privatization went. You could see if you were doing a privatization program and you invite international investors and they don't come, then you know that there's something wrong with that structure or that system. Many of them could see from cradle to grave what the system looked like, the several years of neglect, and what it will take to get the system working. And as long as you had the transmission system still with government, a lot of them had their doubts. So the privatization was a good step. Absolutely good step. The problem with Nigeria is not the idea or is not the policies, but the problem around implementation. So the privatization was done. There were issues, in my view, the way the privatization aspect of it. I think that many of the guys who bought those assets did not even have money to pay for the assets and went at borrowing. People who went at borrowing will find it difficult to even be able to expend costs to improve infrastructure that is already almost dead. That's one problem. Secondly, some of these assets, you can say they were overpriced because even the baseline numbers were wrong. Many of these guys could not undertake proper due diligence, maybe because of labor issues. Labor guys were not letting them come in to undertake due diligence. So many people went in blindly. Some didn't exactly go in blindly, but didn't have money. So if you're borrowing 70% from the bank, the 30 or 40% you're supposed to invest as a major investor, your own equity, you go borrowing it from elsewhere. It means you've got no cash and you've got no skin in the game. So the privatization itself was an ideal, what should have been done ideally, but there were issues around how it was done, the sort of individuals who got some of those assets. So I think that's it. And this problem is historical. I mean, you had NEPA in the 70s, in the 80s, you had lack of proper investment. People saw electricity as a social good and rather steal electricity than pay for it. You had the wrong people managing. There was a story. Right. I think my dad told me a story once. The head of engineering at some point was someone who studied Yoruba or something in the university. The head of a unit in the engineering department. So, it's always been so bad.
And that just aligns. That just aligns with, what the president said during that interview with Channels Television about the power, the privatization process, saying he didn't quite understand why it went that way, why the people that got what they got them. I mean, they were not engineers anyway. In fact, he thought there were political favors and all of that. But let's get deep into this power grid collapse. I mean, because to the average Nigerian, power grid collapse, you wonder, was this grid just standing, got tired, and just collapsed? And I'm talking about this happening at a time where we're still trying to grapple with fuel scarcity and talking petrol, diesel, and essentially, you just ask, how worse can it get? So how does a power grid collapse? I mean, you're in this sector, you're well versed in it. What can cause this power grid to collapse, not once, twice in 48 hours?
Okay, a number of things can cause the grid collapse. One of them is around the frequency and poor planning and scheduling and management, and I'll explain it. A grid is a system or a network of transformers, substations, transmission lines, particularly the transmission lines, substations, all of those. If there's a break, or imagine that something's supposed to even out and there's a lopsided part of it, it can cut that system. So instead of having a system where you've got power coming from the north, you've got power coming from the south, and you've got some evenness. When something is uneven, or you've got poor infrastructure somewhere, it can lead to a system cutting. I'm trying to use a layman's language. So if you've got a web and a part of it cuts, it means that if power is generated somewhere, it's supposed to flow to that end. Because there's a cut, it cannot flow to that end, particularly if it needs to flow further from one end to another end. So that's how it works. And I'll tell you some of the reasons for this. One, I'd explained low frequency and the fact that you have epileptic supply from the south without having commensurate supply from the north. Two, infrastructure. You've got the SCADA, you've got the ENS. The SCADA is the supervisory control and data acquisition, which should monitor the entire system. What we have is, we have one that is almost non-existent because it's outdated and it's been malfunctioning. At the National Control Center in Osogbo, you should have those arrangements in place, because without monitoring the system and knowing that there's a problem here and you quickly resolve it, it can lead to a damage in that part, and then electricity doesn't flow. Just to explain it in a layman language. Additionally, there's a problem with implementation. We've got a strong market design. Every market should have a capacity element, an energy element, an imbalance element, and ancillary services, such as spinning reserves, black start capability, and all of those. But in implementation, many of these, because all of these work together to ensure that the system works efficiently and works well. But in practice, beyond energy and capacity, issues around imbalance do not really exist in the market. Even the market for the ancillary services is non-existent. Because I'll give an example of what an ancillary service does. If there is a break in transmission, there should be a power plant that can restart the system, or a couple of power plants. But that's not implemented. So we have brilliant ideas, but the problem is implementation. If you look at the laws, if you look at the grid code, you will see all of this well detailed.
Well, we'll get
energy
We'll get into the laws, definitely, and regulation and all of that. But we're almost a decade into privatization. And I can talk about some other sectors that have been privatized. And just a few years after, you know how things improved and things continue to improve. So we have issues about load shedding, stranded power, the infrastructure you talked about. And we're still talking about these things at a time where we should be talking about other things. I mean, we had a target of 20,000 megawatts of installed capacity in 2020. This is 2022, and we're still at, just about 10,000 capacity. And in reality, it's way, way below all of that. So subsidy has also been removed, according to the Minister of Finance during that IMF and African Ministers of Finance conference, saying that, it was a gradual thing. So essentially, you would expect that money should be flowing more in that sector, and we shouldn't be talking about all of this. So what do we need to tighten now? Is it, in fact, let's get into the laws. Is it a law thing? Is it a regulatory thing, or what? Because if we're 10 years into, or about 10 years into privatization, and we're still talking about this, then for how long more will we keep talking about this?
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's first an implementation thing. It's not the laws. We've got brilliant laws. We've got brilliant regulations. At times, I think we even over-regulate. I think the problem is implementation. And I'll give you an example. In the power sector, you've got about 4 bands for paying for electricity tariffs. Those who have lights for up to, say, 18 hours, those who have, say, 12 hours, everyone pays a different tariff. But the discos, very often, not all of them, but some of them, do not provide power for that number of hours, yet charge for that band. So imagine you have 4 bands, 20 to 24 hours. Band A is the most expensive. Band B is 18 hours to 20 hours. Band C, much lower, and then band D, less than, say, 6 hours. But someone gets 6 hours of power, but it's charged 20 hours. That's one thing. NERC needs to do more in that respect. It's not about just issuing regulations. Implementation is the problem. Secondly, even you and I, the consumer, wanting to
just
not
1 second.
pay or wanting to steal.
Why does that happen? Why is it a lack of capacity on the part of the discos, or the supply that they get from maybe the Gencos or the Trancos?
Okay, it's 2 things. Poor infrastructure for some of them, pure marketing discipline, and I'll tell you what I mean by marketing discipline. You know that you've got to pay your invoices, and therefore you need to supply electricity. But for reasons best known to them, they would rather issue estimated invoices than supply electricity.
Is that on that particular one? My apologies. So this is interesting and people can follow. Is there a penalty for that? For estimated billing? Is it something that is against the law, so to speak?
Oh yes, there are regulations that say that caps what you can estimate. In fact, at some point, I think from April last year, you weren't allowed to estimate any longer.
So whose responsibility is it to ensure that there is a flag for that action?
That's NERC.
In other words, the NERC, the NERC, the regulator, is not doing its job. Now, still talking to the laws, that Kayode, asked you about the other time, there are those who are wondering, maybe the whole thing is too centralized. How about the states, at least, come in and assist at some point? We have all of these discos all over the place. Perhaps all of the infrastructure and everything are things that have been the responsibility of the federal government over the years. There is a city in this country that we know didn't have power blink for many, many years. you know, and it is not something that is unknown. It's something that can be done. I'm almost certain that some of the infrastructure that they engaged in that particular city, it's an oil company servicing its own host community. They had to create these things themselves. So it is possible to have uninterrupted power supply. That is what that establishes. So if states were to play a role, what would be the difference? Are the laws of Nigeria against that?
Okay, good question. There's always been that constitutional debate whether states can legislate on generation, transmission, distribution. I mean, my view is that states can legislate on distribution because it's a residual matter. That said, there's a lot of conversation going on around decentralization and allowing states to legislate across the value chain. I think it's a step in the right direction. However, and for me, it's energy federalism. Each state will develop according to its capacity and use the resources it does have. For example, Enugu may use coal. Yeah, there are issues around net zero and all of that. Maybe there's clean coal technology. Other states may use resources most efficient for them. Now, the only challenge I have with that is, wouldn't we suffer the same fate? We need to understand the issues that have plagued the sector. Now, saying that you've got a behemoth, you've got a system, and then you want to break it down into several systems, you may just be replicating the same problems if you do not tackle the problems head on. Marketing discipline, consumers not wanting to pay, ministries, departments, and agencies of government owing bills, you know, those issues, even the grid, if a state does have its grid, and you've got issues around poor scheduling, poor planning, poor infrastructure, you just have 36 states, maybe one or two successful, 34, 33 states still having the same problem. So I'm not sure decentralization alone, I think that's good, and it's maybe very important. Decentralization alone, however, is insufficient without properly situating the problems and dealing with the problems specifically.
At the end of the day, you talked about the regulator not doing its job as and when it should do it, consequently making lives, you know, a little more difficult for people, you know, on the long run. This kind of collapse that we've been having, as we heard, in 48 hours, two national grid collapses. That wouldn't happen in a federalized, so to speak, to use your word, power system, would it?
Okay, good point. There are always debates around the concept known as regulatory capture. If you do have regulatory capture in any state, it will still be the same problem. Now, I haven't exactly said NERC isn't doing its job. I think that there are failings in certain aspects of its job. In terms of regulations, good regulations, some implementation, but isn't doing enough in terms of using the stick and implementation. So yes, with various states having their own regulators, if politics takes the better of regulation, you will have the same problem. So the question is whether we've completely depolitized, and I use that in quote, our regulatory regime. If we don't, it will be the same problem across board. So it's not just saying we should have several regulators across the states. It's about actually dealing with the problems head on.
Well, isn't it rather curious as well that we're having this at a time when, as I said earlier on, you know, we had petrol scarcity, diesel, the prices skyrocketing. I mean, those are the alternatives. I mean, talking about renewable energy like solar and all of that, you know how much it costs. So it's no-go area for some people. So the only option they have at this time, which was, you know, power supply from government, also failed. And I recall the president in that interview again, which I'm referencing, talking about some sort of sabotage as well. And I recall that TCN said that they had unveiled this technology using the Internet of Things to properly monitor and see what's happening here and there. So is that also a consideration in all of this conversation, a possibility of sabotage at this time? Because it just, you know, beats my mind while we're having 2 collapses in 48 hours.
Well, I don't have sufficient data to say it's sabotage, to be honest. But you can't rule that out. But I think it's the historical problems are not adequately dealing with those problems. And at times it appears like we deal with one and some other rears its ugly head. I think it's that problem beyond sabotage. There could be sabotage, but I'm not sure I'm going to lay at those steps of sabotage, to be honest.
Okay. So we were talking about Consumer Protection Day. Incidentally, it was yesterday, and about that interview, or the conference that the Minister of Finance was speaking at, where she talked about the gradual removal of subsidy in electricity sector. For a lot of people, it was shocking. They had, noticed it or suspected, seeing energy costs increasing and, the units they get reducing. We thought maybe they didn't quite pay attention. But hearing that officially, just hit home. Like, oh, that was what was really happening. So in terms of that removal, because hearing the Vice President of IMF talking about how to go about some of these changes, there needs to be communication, there needs to be the buy-in of the people, then it needs to be commitment of government also to fiscal reforms, essentially saying there are ways to go about this. Do you think that was the best approach to removing subsidy? Now seeing that even after the removal of subsidy, it will seem that things are even getting worse.
Oh, very, very good point. The problem with that is you can't do that sort of thing in isolation. If you remove subsidy, then you need to ensure that people pay for efficiency and they pay for the actual service. And I think that's what they try to do with the band system, so that only when, and those who subsidies be removed for completely are those who should be in bands A and B effectively, in my view. But unfortunately, like you rightly pointed out, many of the discos still under supply and then still charge what they would have charged if they were efficient and if they supplied the power, sufficient power supply. There was sufficient power supply. So I think when policies such as these are implemented, you need to take a holistic view. So you remove subsidy, but you ensure that if there isn't power supply, no one pays. That's one of the reasons around 2015, 2016, if I recall, the capacity element, the fixed charge element was removed from what electricity distribution companies charge, so that they only get paid when they supply electricity. Now, what has made nonsense of that is estimated billing and the fact that many people still don't have their meters. So my view is that a distribution company goes to an area and says, you know what, we need to generate 12 billion from this area, and they just issue invoices to meet up that amount. You get 100 million, you get 1 million, 100,000, you get 1 million, you get 5 million. I think that's what they do, especially for areas where they do not have meters. So removal of subsidy isn't a bad thing,
right?
But I think that it shouldn't just be that.
Okay.
There should be enforcement, ensuring people only pay when there's electricity.
So we're closing in about...
Right,
we're closing about 20 seconds. I just wanted to ask this. For those who are still getting estimated billings, I know people getting above 100,000, in fact, as at this year. What should they do, if you can do that in 15 seconds?
Okay, I think they should first approach the relevant customer service unit of the distribution company. If they are not satisfied, they can then reach out to NERC, or maybe speak to their advisors, speak to their lawyers who can take it up, because they will then know the process or the procedure. So reach out to the distribution company. If you're not satisfied, reach out to NERC. NERC has got email addresses on their website, and that's one thing they seem to do quite well. If you reach out to them, they should be able to get it resolved. Yes. Well,
we'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Ayodele Oni, commercial lawyer and partner, Energy Practice Group, Bloomfield LP. I mean, your contributions have been quite instructive in this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we'll take another part to this conversation. You recall the regulatory part? Well, that's next in a moment. Please stay with us.
The management of the grid is responsible for why we are facing what we are facing. It's one of the reasons. And why is it so? If you check the PPA, for some of you that have been long in the sector, you know that the average PPA, that is a power purchase agreement, allows the generation companies to have a start-stop when your machine will start and stop, no more than 20 times in a year, in 1 year. Now, the current experience we are having in Nigeria is the generation companies are made to start and stop for over 365 times in a year. So from 2013 till date, power has not been optimally utilized. More than 50% is stranded. So telling us that there is low power is making us think, are we serious? Currently today, on capacity, on paid for available capacity, we are owed by MBET 1,644,15. If government can clear our outstanding debts, give us FX to maintain our plants, we are ready to generate up to 9,000 megawatts. Mechanically, we are available.
Well, it's not called a crisis for nothing when a nation is thrown into a blackout twice in 2 days. We understand that there's been a system collapse twice in 2 days. And my colleague did let you know that we were going to be expecting the Regulatory Commission on the program this morning. Well, they're here. They stand in the gap between yourself and the power companies, be they generation, transmission, and distribution. We have with us this morning Mr. Michael Faloshe, who is the Assistant General Manager, Public Affairs Department of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning. I was just teasing him just before we got on set that, I was asking if he slept well, whether the electricity blackout also affected him as well. So did it affect you?
What's the general problem?
Meaning it affected you, right? But, I mean, you will have a clearer understanding of what is happening in the sector. A system collapse twice in 48 hours or less than 48 hours is not a very pleasant scenario. What is going on?
Well, let me thank you, Mrs. Makwe Yusuf, for having me in the studio, and good morning, Nigerians. Let me start by saying that system collapse is not a citizen of Nigeria. It's a mechanical issue and it could happen. But there is something about investment, there is about maintenance, there is about capacity that could have accounted for this. I will explain to you that about 80% of the nation's capacity, power capacity, is thermal, and 20% is hydro. And you can bear witness to the fact that for about the last time we had rain on a sustainable basis should be some 4 or 5 months back. So that explains why the hydropower plants, they are trying their best, even though you've seen some narratives in the media blaming them, but they should be commended in actual fact because they've been able to maintain their power plants even at the, not at the optimal level, but to fill in the gap. Now, for the power plant that accounted for the 80% of the generation capacity, about 4 of them are responsible for the baseline, the bulk of the power that we receive.
The baseline is what percentage?
It's about 1,000 or thereabout.
1,000 megawatts?
More than that, yeah.
Okay, so that accounts for about what, 20%?
Of the entire capacity now. So we're talking about 20% of 80% now, which is more. So by the time you have the hydros not operating at the optimal level, then you have 3 of the base power plant having issue. We have, I think, Opai has issue with vandalism. Before now, Shell FM6 has been slated for maintenance. Then Calabar, Iwobo, was slated for pigging. That's the pipeline that supplies the gas to the stations. You have to remove the liquid in the system, otherwise the power plant will be damaged. All these things were happening just about the same time, not for the fault of anybody. The issue of vandalism, you're not going to blame the regulator, neither are you going to blame the power plant. That's our social challenge. It's a social malady that the government is trying to address. Shell power plant has been slated for maintenance long before now. And if you don't maintain the plant at the time you are supposed to maintain it, you'll be paying more, and it could lead to collapse of the power plant itself. So by the time you remove the capacity of these 3 power plants, about 1,000 of the capacity is already out. And you know, this is like a perfect storm situation. You can't blame anybody for this. However, assuming we have adequate capacity, assuming we have excess capacity, perhaps maybe if one plant is down, others could have come in. Even if we are operating at our threshold of 4,045, at no point in time will all of us, 200 million Nigerians, if we hooked on to the power plant, we can't all have light at the same time because there is not enough capacity. But the capacity that we now have this challenge of vandalism, maintenance of 2 of those power plants. That's what has accounted for that. As at this moment, I think the pigging at the power plant be completed by March 21st. Then the repair work on the vandalized pipeline, I think that one has been completed. And the power plant, as at the last time that I checked, was doing about 235 megawatts. So it's ramping up gradually to attain 375, which is its optimal capacity. So those are the issues that accounted for the challenge that we have. Normally, February, March is not always the best time for us because of the hydro capacity. But as I said earlier, the hydro power plants, they've been performing magic, so to say, to make sure that they at least stand in the gap, so to use the word of
well, standing in the gap doesn't look like it's enough right now because the system, I mean, these are not our words. We understand that the system collapsed, right?
As Dr. Uni said earlier, many things could have accounted for system collapse. And as a regulator, we don't play to the gallery. When there's a system collapse, the system operator will notify us immediately.
Have you been notified?
We've been notified. And within 24 hours, a report will be submitted. The one that's happened yesterday, we've been notified. We'll be expecting reports to know what causes it. But naturally, what we call system collapse is when there is imbalance in the system, whether either from the side of consumption, from generation, or anywhere along the value chain. If there is imbalance, then the system can collapse.
So, from what you have told me now and told Nigerians, you've talked about how the baseline companies for the thermal power generators, that some of them have vandalism affecting them, some had scheduled maintenance, and all of this was happening almost at the same time. And that affected about 1,000 megawatts plus, which was supposed to be on the grid. From what we understand, we have capacity for at least 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts. That's what we've been told.
Of generation.
Of generation. We understand our transmission can wheel as much as it's still a little unsettled, but between 5,000, let's just believe that 5,000 at the minimum. So let us even say that 1,000 plus is off the grid as we speak. What happened to the remaining at least maybe 3-5 that is supposed to be on the grid?
That's what I will explain to you, that at this point in time, at this period of the year, you are not expecting the hydro at their optimal level.
Yes, but the hydro, what do they really contribute? If they're contributing about 20%.
20%, yes.
Yes, 20% of maybe 5,000. Is it 20% of what the transmission companies can will, or is it 20%
of
our generation capacity?
Yeah.
So let us assume 20% of 7,000. Is that correct?
You see, you've narrated the scenario. From generation to transmission, the capacity is reducing. And by the time you get to distribution, you're talking about 5,000 megawatts. So by the time you remove 20%, which like more than 1,000 or thereabout, you remember, Egbin Power Plant, you reported a hard issue. There was an accident there.
Egbin?
Yes. So, though they are working, a section of that plant is working.
Okay.
But they are not also working at optimal.
So when you say they are not, can you give us exact figures? What exactly is our hydro, what are our hydro companies currently contributing to the national grid?
So as at this moment, so I will not have the figures at this, as we are talking.
But as at yesterday.
So as at, on the 10th, Kanji was doing 382, Jeba was doing 327, Shiroro was doing 215. So
combined, maybe roughly about 1,000.
Yes.
You know, perhaps around that figure.
That's right. Yeah.
What happened to that? It's not...
So it does, it does appear that you are assuming that there is nothing being generated outrightly. I've told you, we have a threshold of 4,005 or thereabouts. The baseline tower are not available. Mm-hmm. So by the time you had some of these issues together, you are left with about 2,000 thereabouts. So the moment you have that level, there will be crisis in the system because you are talking about half of your capacity. It's not as if nothing is being generated outrightly. There are other power plants that are working.
Coincidentally, too, I mean, and you can tell us if this is also coincidence, but from what we can see, all of this is happening at the same time. Yeah. On the 13th, you just saw the briefing by the generation companies of Nigeria just before they came to us, you know, talking about how they are being owed over ₦1 trillion and that they're in dire need of FX for the maintenance of their plants. It does look like I don't know, that was not included in that report, but we did hear that if they were not paid a huge chunk of their money, something to keep them going, they were also going to shut down. And people think that perhaps this could be as a result of what we're saying. The 13th is just 3 days ago. That was when that press briefing was done. Did any RC see that?
Well, we have a position on not joining issue with any of our licenses on the pages of newspaper. Regulatory issue, you don't play to the gallery. So whoever is talking on whoever's capacity, we give a license to individual companies, not to an association. And our position, you will never see CBN debating with First Bank or Zenith Bank or whoever. But the fact of the matter is that we are serious with our job. We are addressing to those issues that has been put before the commission, and we are on top of every situation to make sure that all power plants are operating as a going concern. That somebody is owed is a trade issue. I mean, there is no business that you don't have somebody owing somebody. You have to. I mean, it's about you are selling and buying at any point in time. Even the malam selling at your gate, there are times you say, okay, I'll give you your money tomorrow morning. So it does happen. So, but it doesn't mean that whoever is in charge will go to sleep. Those issues are being addressed. So but we have a position, as I said, that we don't join issue with our licensee or association.
You might not join issues, and I think that NERC reserves the right to do that. This is something that has now come to a public domain. The public is now aware of this, and it's something that is of concern to us because when the generation companies say they have owed this much money and they have not been paid, we know that MBET was set up as a stopgap measure to try and bridge that gap in funding for the generation companies. Now, we know that it's also very difficult for companies when they do not have money to keep going on as an operation. So we will certainly ask you what you're going to do about that so that the consumers are not affected by whatever action they decide to take as a union or as individual companies. Yeah,
as I said earlier, the regulatory issue is not about playing to the gallery. There is an issue of, there is a past sector recovery program of the federal government, being supervised by the Commission that is addressing to all these payment issue, and they have been attended to one after the other. The issue of MDA debt that was read by the earlier speaker, which is also an extension of whatever she's saying. As at this moment, or by the end of this month, about 40 billion naira will be settled out of about verified 80 billion naira MDA's debt. So that is an action that has been taken. But you will not expect the regulator to come on the pages of the newspaper. We don't do, we are going to. We follow actions and we make sure that our actions are carried out. We don't play to the gallery.
Well, this is what we have. I mean, we don't expect you to play to the gallery. What we expect is that you raise questions on our behalf when there are issues like this. I mean, system collapse is something that is serious. When an entire nation is thrown into a blackout scenario, it's something that, you know, the NERC should show that they are on top of their game.
Of course, that's what I've told you. We've settled, bills have been settled.
Yes, but
I've mentioned 40 billion and have been settled. So,
I know that. What I'm trying to say...
the PSR or PSRP, it was attending to some of those issues about Genco's debt that
Sorry, who
she
is
raised.
the PSRP?
Past Sector Recovery Program.
Okay.
Was attending, they verified their bills, and before 2015, their bills were not being paid in full. But from 2015, 2016, their bills are being paid between 100 and 85%.
Is there a monitoring of this situation from NERC before they arise? Because, I mean, this briefing, as I did mention, was done on Monday. Yeah. It would mean that I would not think that the generation companies will just decide that, you know, they want to do a press briefing. There must have been some engagement with the NERC, with the regulator, to say this is becoming unbearable. I imagine that's what they would have done.
You see, within the regulatory landscape, there are means of communication. Let me tell you for free, by next week, Monday or Tuesday, the Commission will be having what we call stakeholders meeting of the industry, like what we call the Bankers Committee. So there is a line of communication. But if there's an association that is speaking on behalf of whoever, it is also within the exercise of their fundamental human rights. And the regulator is not expected to be joining free with association. We are not regulating association. We are regulating companies, and we have a means of communicating with them. Some of the issues if the issue of MDA debt, it was addressed to the level of the highest authority in the country. And as of today, 40 billion out of 80 billion has been settled, and gradually like that, the debt will be settled. The PSRP is to attend to the issue being raised by the generators.
Let me clarify this. Are you saying that this press briefing, which happened on Monday, has nothing to do with the system collapse, which we've currently experienced twice in 48 hours?
I think you should put that question to her. I've explained to you what caused the...
No, I'm asking. I mean...
No, I can't address that. There may be a reason why they are addressing their issue. So I've explained to you...
Let us forget the union now. I'm just saying, as individual companies, because you talked about the baseline companies, which you're aware of, but we also know that the generation companies are more than the baseline companies, which you have mentioned, that there are a few other generation companies, and we do not know if those generation companies were also producing. Were they producing?
They are producing, but the challenge with some of those ones is they do not have, they get gas, most of them, they get gas on best endeavor basis. They do not have gas contract. So when you do not have gas contract, it means that the gas supplier supplies you as when I feel like.
Or as you pay.
As you pay. So not necessarily if you already have a contract of somebody you are supposed to supply gas, and even if you are carrying your cash now, and the gas has been contracted, it is not going to disappoint the contracted power and give you. So it may not be about as you pay per se. About payment.
Okay, so what I want to know is this. Are you saying that you do not see any, because...
what I will say is this. For lack
of a better phrase, the witch cried, or the owl cried the night before and the child died in the morning.
They are businessmen.
Yes.
And I think some issues need to be put at the front burner for whatever purpose and to achieve whatever purpose. They are businessmen, and their money, even to the last couple, matters to them. So, but as far as the regulator is concerned, all issues in the industry, we are attending to them. The issue of whether somebody is owed is a normal trade issue that somebody should be owed. But what you will need to be sure about is how and when am I going to be paid? So that's what will concern you as somebody being owed. So, and it's within their business right to do that.
Let me flip this to my colleague in Lagos, Ayo.
Thank you, Malkwe. Well, the analogy Mr. Falushe gave the other time about the repayment, it's a little funny because, I mean, on the one hand, it's not 1 million naira that is being owed. It's not even 100 million. It's 1.6 trillion naira that's being owed, and it dates back to 2015. So I'm wondering how you want to address that one. But that's not my question. Now, Mr. Falushe, I'd like you to listen to this quote, this statement again.
If you check the PPA, for some of you that have been long in the sector, you know that the average PPA, that is a power purchase agreement, allows the generation companies to have a start-stop. When your machine will start and stop, no more than 20 times in a year, in 1 year. Now, the current experience we are having in Nigeria is the generation companies are made to start and stop for over 365 times in a year.
Is this something that is normal with the NERC? Is it okay with the NERC? And what's been done to checkmate this?
Well, some issues, well, it is abnormal that our system is like that. It's about investment issue. It's about the state of the network. And also, let me also clarify the fact that some issues are also being dramatized. As I said earlier, it is not our practice to join issue, number one, with association.
But is the facts correct or not? I think that's what's important here, Mr. Falushe. Just a second.
No.
Let's speak to the facts.
Excuse me, please.
Let's look away from the association.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Can I speak, please?
Okay,
can
go
I
ahead.
Speak, please?
You can.
I speak?
You
You've
can.
asked
Go
me
ahead.
a question, so you don't interject.
Go ahead.
So, as I said earlier, it is true that our system is not stable. But the issue of 365 days, those are facts being dramatized.
So what is the current position?
20, but
what is the current...
The system...
Go ahead. What's the current position? If
current
it's not up to 360.
Current
if it's not up to 360.
I have told you...
What is the number?
Number of what now? We have two system collapse recently.
Yes.
Yes, so what other figure do you want?
The start-stop number that she gave, she said it's not supposed to be more than 20, according to the PPA, which I'm sure you're aware of. And she says it's about 360. If it is not 360 from what you're saying, what is the number?
I think the issue here is about, for us to have stable power system and to have adequate supply, at the heart of this issue is the fact that, number one, we do not have adequate power. We do not have robust network. So there is no way there will not be stop and start issue being addressed. So, and for as long as you have not attained the starting level of investment, the issue will still keep on coming up. And this issue, as I said earlier, have been addressed as and when due, and the regulator is on top of his game.
Well, first, I'd like to commend you, really, for not shying away from these issues, for coming to speak to them. I think it's quite important for Nigerians to know what's going on. There's been the talk about a certain emergency meeting that was summoned by the Minister of Power. I'd like to know if the NERC was there, because that meeting was said to have been called to find a solution out of this. So do you have an inkling as to what is being done to get out of this? Because we don't want to hear about another collapse in another 24 or 48 hours.
Well, until we know the fact of the matter. Yesterday, the system collapse that happened yesterday, about 300 megawatts was thrown out of the system. But as I said earlier, that one happened after the meeting with the minister. The system is, as long as there is an imbalance in the system, either from the side of demand or supply side,
No, I understand. You've explained that part about why we're seeing a collapse.
Capacity.
Pardon me. I mean, you've tried to explain. No, you've explained that over and again because of our time. I'd just like you to give Nigerians some glimmer of hope, if there is any, regarding that meeting. At least there was one collapse before this one, and I imagine you've gotten the report. So what is the way out? What is being done? I mean, coming from that meeting with the Minister of Power,
the way out is to have enough investment in the system, and that is what the regulator is addressing. When you have enough capacity, you no longer be talking of system collapse. For at the level at which we are, there is no way we will not have system collapse, but it's been addressed. That's what I've told you.
How long will it take to achieve that investment infrastructure? I imagine that doesn't take a few days. So is that a long-term solution? If it is, what is a short-term solution to this, and perhaps a mid-term solution?
Well, the short-term solution is to make sure that we have a contract-based industry. That is, those power generation companies that are getting gas on best endeavor basis. The Commission is working on a plan where the industry will be contract-based. So if the industry is contract-based, you know that when you supply, you must get your money. Then it will bring in some level of sanity into the network. Okay. And it will reduce the level of system collapse.
Is a rise in tariff also one of the solutions? Because it's been said that the tariffs are not cost reflective, and coming off the Minister of Finance saying that the subsidy has been removed gradually. Is that also a way to stabilize that sector and ensure that we get value?
Exactly, it's partly part of it, but not entirely. Tariff alone does not generate electricity, but it's addressing part of the challenges.
So was NERC really in the know as well in this, subsidy removal, tariff increase? Because there's meant to be a process. You have all this MITO and all of that. So were you in the know? Is this something you approved of? And now, I mean, we're seeing it happen.
Well, let me put that comment by the Minister of Finance in context. What was done was the fact that the DISCOs were told to clarify, to categorize their customers in 5 categories of A, B, C, D, E, which Dr. Oni was talking about the other time. People with 20 hours, 16 hours, 12 hours, 8 hours, and 4 hours capacity. After that had been done, the people who are on minimum of 20 hours generation were to pay. It's like what was done was, this is the cost of giving you 20 hours of electricity, and this is your bill, or this is the tariff at which you will get this power. So this is the cost of giving you 16 hours. This is your tariff. So that one, in a way, reduced the level of subsidy in the system. So those who are on 4 hours are still being, in a way, being subsidized, in a way, because their cost may not be reflective of what it should be. But there's a caveat there. After the DISCOs have done this, they've also submitted an improvement plan to make sure that people are moved from E to D, from D to C, from C to B, and A, gradually, so that the classification is not about whether rich or poor. It's about the status of capacity, or the status of the ability of equipment within your area. Because you are not going to categorize, or they cannot categorize you as A, maybe because you are living in so and so place, and the capacity of infrastructure in your area cannot meet that capacity. So the purpose of that one is to say, okay, DISCOs, give us the status of your infrastructure. What can you do at this location? What can you do at this location? On the basis of that, the tariff were categorized. Mm-hmm. After that one, performance improvement plan was submitted by the DISCOs. So for these categories of customer, how do you move them over time to this level of capacity? And not just that, progressively as we go on, if you have put somebody on a band and you are unable to meet that band, you are going to refund for collecting that money. So
refund?
Yes, you're going to refund.
In the plan that they're submitting, right?
Yes.
Okay, because there were questions as to whether...
and what you are refunding, it's not about giving cash now. It's not about giving cash. You're going to refund in energy.
Let me quickly ask you this about calibration, because there are those who have also alleged that, oh, you know, I'm still getting the same number of units when I buy, but it looks like my meter is running faster. And there were also times when distribution companies were, at least I got a few calls like that, distribution companies were calling to say, we need to come and change your meter. That meter is now expired. Obviously, I'm sure that they want to change it to something that runs faster. So tell us what should happen with calibration. When should people start saying, no, my meter looks like it's running too fast?
You see, the issue is this. There is no meter that is in the network that has not passed through test of NEMSA, that has been tested and certified. Sometimes when people say I've heard that story on many occasions, but I think two things they need to do. I doubt some of those stories, but I will not say that they are lying until when they've been submitted, when it has been subjected to technical test. I've seen instances where people make such allegations. By the time NEMSA comes around and tests the thing, they say, look, your allegation is unfounded. I've heard similar, because we deal with customer complaints. We've had it. By the time NEMSA comes around, the thing is tested, and some of the stories.
But you've also heard the distribution companies have been going around to change meters. Yes.
You see, if maybe depending on the lifetime of a meter is about 10 to 15 years. It's very possible that a meter is there, current is passing through, and it's no longer counting. That's a possibility. But each case should be treated on its own merit. You're not going to say maybe a customer is lying or maybe the disco is wrong or right. The system, the machine is for him to calculate his money. So if he feels that the machine is not working properly, he has a right to put the, especially if the machine is now bad. You see some meters that are up to 30, 40 years old.
Yes.
You are not expecting them to work.
Not prepaid meters.
Analog meters.
Analog meters. But these ones are prepaid meters. Well, they were changing prepaid meters.
Yeah, you know, even some of this, the first generation of prepaid meters, they are more than 10 years old now. This, let me not mention company's name because I'm on air. Some of them are more than 10 years. So it's not impossible that they may be having challenges. But as I said earlier, each case should be treated on its own merit. And if you are not satisfied, you approach the commission. First of all, tell NEMSA. NEMSA will come around. They will come and test the meter.
Okay. So that's the process for those who are concerned about how their meters are currently running. But from what you know in terms of tariff increase, by how much percentage are those on Band A and Band B, those who have experienced an increase, by what percentage did their tariff go up?
Well, you know, we have 11 companies. And you will not be talking of how nobody is paying average price. But you see in some locations, some Band A may be paying 56, some may be maybe for Abuja, maybe paying 56 or 65 or thereabout, maybe another one in Ikeja or Iko. So if you are talking of average, nobody pays average. We are talking of 11 companies. You are talking of...
Well, are the companies allowed to dictate what they want to charge now for the different bands?
I've told you, see, their production cost differs. Your operating environment differs. What service-based tariff has done is to say, okay, tell us the capacity of your infrastructure as respective locations. How many hours can you do? What is your operating cost? On the basis of that, tariffs are calculated.
So you do not have a maximum band that, you know, beyond this, from what we know of the current capacity of the system, of the entire system, you cannot go beyond this. Do you have such a band?
No.
As a regulator?
You'll be talking of cost of production. You'll be talking of whether it's a due diligent cost and the cost that can be passed over. Take for instance, if you are bringing your cost of production and you're putting cost of buying, building a house for your CEO, that one is not part of cost of your production. So the regulation will not allow it. So every element of your cost will be examined before it's allowed to be passed over. So you are not going to put a ceiling. But the cost has to be the real cost of producing power.
Let me just clarify this last question. So this, because I know that before now, the distribution companies used to ask for a review of prices. They will say, oh, we're due for a review of prices, and it used to be the job of the NERC to do that.
Right, yeah.
You no longer do that.
No, it's still there. You know, the tariff methodology that we have adopted is multi-year tariff order.
MITO.
MITO, yes. And MITO says at every 6 months, you do minor review. And every 5 years, you do major review. For instance, if, the cost of production, even at a particular location, will not remain static over a period of time. So if in the course of your operation, maybe you are bringing in additional capacity, it's coming at a cost. For instance, if you are moving a customer from band D to C, it's coming at a cost. Okay, I'm buying additional transformer. I'm bringing in this number of poles. These things will come into your cost of production. And if part of your cost of production, somebody has to pay for it.
Okay. So they're allowed to increase their tariff before even the tariff review is due.
I have not said that. You submit your application to the regulator. In so number of months, I'm bringing in additional transformer. This is the cost. I'm bringing in so number of wire. It will be calculated. If the margin is at a certain level.
Mr. Faloshe, I appreciate your explanation. It's just that we're totally out of time. And I was just trying to quickly get out, whether or not in simple yes or no, whether you're still very much involved in price regulation.
We approve tariff.
Okay, you're still approving the tariff.
Yes, if you submit your application and you can defend it, then to be approved for you.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. Mr. Michael Faloshe is the Assistant General Manager, Public Affairs Department of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and has been speaking with us here in our Abuja studios. Well, we tried to get as much questions as we could, but that's not happening. But thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. We'll take a break at this point, and we'll be moving to another issue that also concerns you, also on this energy crisis. Please stay with us.
The Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives and some members meet with airline operators and regulatory agencies of the aviation sector. The meeting is to unravel the circumstances surrounding the increase in airfares brought about by scarcity and increase in aviation fuel.
1 year ago, he was selling...
The Director General of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority and the GMD of the NNPC brief on how dire the situation is.
Considering the cost of air ticket now, the base of 15 naira, the airline industry cannot survive. It's either we shut them down because they cannot generate enough revenue to operate safely, sir. I'm not even talking about cancellations and delays. I'm talking about safety of flight operations.
Today, the landing cost of air ticket today in the country today is 418 naira today. I just checked that with my colleague here. What would it be? The price that we have no control, that's what the international price is. It is 418 naira today.
The airline operators are disturbed by the hike in aviation fuel from 190 to 670 naira per litre.
We wanted to shut that, but when we look back, with benefit of hindsight, what the legislation did for airlines, what the presidency did for airlines, we decided to sacrifice for this country. On this table, you find 2 Nigerian patrons because we are subsidizing what at each and every one of you are using in flying. But we cannot continue. We cannot last the next 72 hours doing that.
We are now beginning to compromise even in our safety. All of us fly here. All of us fly here. Nobody, if you tell somebody to take cab, go by road to Maiduguri, he will not go. All of us fly here. So why are we trying to compromise our safety? It's a critical issue. Who is bringing this fuel? And what price are they bringing? Somebody has to regulate them.
Attention turns to the Consumer Protection Council, which is accused of not doing its job.
Our intervention was forced to other airlines that they cannot coordinate.
Do you have the communication?
Well, it was online. We put it out.
Have the communication?
I do not have it here, but the airlines do not dispute that they received an order. Every airline here received an order from the FCCPC.
Who would be doing business that will have this market increase and maintain the same price if it's their own business?
No,
let's be honest.
And we understand that, right, Honorable?
And that's why I'm asking you, you as an agent of government, you are supposed to be concerned about the price, you are supposed to monitor, so you are failing your duty.
Respectfully, sir.
It's okay, thank you.
A GMD, whoever is responsible, whether regulatory, supervisory, authority, whatever it is, you know what the law is. And you know the law better than all of us here. In fact, you drop the process.
The lawmakers are concerned about the continued price increase, as well as the reason why marketers are insisting on upfront cash payment. The marketers are to appear before the committee subsequently for further investigation. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Let's see how much of the issues we can take on this morning with Tayo Ujui, who is an aviation consultant, as well as MD Aglo Aviation Support Services. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let me ask you a simple question. Are we safe?
Yes, we are safe. And
for how long?
Safety and economic viability are two different things. We're safe, and for how long we will be able to find out in the next few days. Because literally, with the cost of fuel, Jet A1 fuel as it is not sustainable for domestic flight carriers.
Well, that much has been referenced by the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. But the question then is, with all of the interventions and all going on, how helpful has that been and how sustainable?
There's no intervention. It's just been lots of talks about negotiations, because as at yesterday, they tried to fix the price at 500. The GMD said the landing cost is 480. So at some stations, it's going to be far more than 480. So you find out with landing and transportation logistics, it's averaging about 550 per litre, especially in Lagos. So with that, and if I give just this simple analogy, you have 70 passengers, which is on a good day, you fill your aircraft with 70 passengers at 50,000, that gives you 3.5 million. And if you have to buy fuel to go to Abuja, which is one of the most frequent routes, with a baseline of 10,000 litres at 550, that's 5.5 million. So you are already out by 2 million.
And that's not the only cost.
Yes, that's not the only cost. And don't forget, now the marketers are enforcing that they pay cash. The airlines pay cash before they actually service. So how long will the airlines be able to sustain this at this price? And that's why they're saying it's just 72 hours for this to be resolved. Else, literally, the domestic airline industry will shut down.
The question, a number of questions, really come here. On the one hand is scarcity. On the other hand is availability at all. Do we have them in stock? Because the last time we had a conversation with aviation fuel marketers, they said they didn't even have stock.
To the best of my knowledge, and actually that has been portrayed by the GMD, that says 19 marketers with 88 million metric tons of Jet A1 was available. So this does answer your question. 88 million metric tons is a lot. And this just started in the last few days. So we do have stock. What I think, in my opinion, is the flip side is, yes, we have the Russia-Ukraine crisis. By the time they finish this stock, they would actually have to go back to the market. So they're trying to actually make gains on what the stock are available, because don't forget, like you rightly said, there are other factors. The Forex is a big impact. By the time they go to the market to buy at the new stock, they might not be able to break even.
So the options are to either hoard, which has been said, or jack up the prices.
Which is both happening at this time.
Interesting. But as at today, I imagine, or as at the last time you checked, ever since that deal was brokered, saying that you should sell at 500 with the GMD and all of that, how much is it being sold now?
The deal wasn't brokered. It was just a meeting, and the honor system, it's still been, the domestic airlines are still subsidizing that operations. And you rightly heard the chairman of Airpeace saying it's going to be about 120,000 naira for a ticket, for a base fare. That's going to, because to answer your question, you're seeing the price of about 550, which is that Lagos, ex-Lagos. By the time you get the transportation to Maiduguri, to Kano, you're looking back to about 600, 650, or about 700.
I'm still quite curious when you said the deal was not broken. Now, I'm reading from the NNPC's Twitter handle now. This was put out 2 days ago, March the 14th, saying the House and NNPC earlier today brokered an interim agreement between oil marketers and airline operators in a bid towards resolving the current aviation fuel situation in the country. And he talked about, having Moman, DAPMA, AON, and the rest. And there's a video actually attached where the GMB talked about, having to sell 500 naira for now and eventually get the operators to start importing the fuel. So to that extent, a deal was said to have been brokered.
Being brokered and implementation are two different things.
Right.
And where the rubber meets the road, as at yesterday's operations, it was not sold at 500 in Lagos per litre. So that's where it's in that room, and where the handshakes were made, it was offered. But when you go to the market and they see that 500 is not realistic, and it's based on the airline's negotiating power with the marketers, as well as being able to pay upfront, that's not a deal for the sustainability of the domestic airlines. Go ahead.
What are the options that are feasible? One of the suggestions by the airline operators is, look, give us license to import our own fuel. That's one option that someone has put on the table. Another one has said, and you talked about, the dollars. Some aviation fuel marketers want to import themselves so that there can be availability, and market forces will determine the rest and all of that. So what are the options that are realistic for you?
What we've seen, because this is not actually new, we've seen this, aviation has been open to shocks with the Iraq war, lots of wars that happened in the past, even the SARS. What we've seen is what the airlines do, and has worked, is you hedge your funds, you hedge your oil over the year. So what the hedge process is you know what your uptake and your locations is for the year. And you actually meet your preferred marketers and say, okay, I'm guaranteeing you X number of liters for X number of naira. And you pay that and you fix that for X number of months. So that would actually guarantee your cost and ensure that the fluctuation is actually not affecting your cost. Because you have to understand that 40% of our operations in aviation is oil-based, the fuel. So what we need to have done is hedge this. Now, going to that part of the airlines are important. I'm not giving to that, because you find out that Delta Airlines, with about 680 fleet equipment in 2012, actually bought a refinery. It went belly up because it's not their area of primary business. It's not their core business. So what they have to do is actually partner with refineries or those that are in that business, and they'll be able to provide the fuel and hedge the fuel so that they have guaranteed fuel for their operations.
Now, is that what happened with the international airlines? Because we understand that they don't have this. You kept talking about domestic airlines. Does that also happen to international airlines?
They hedge. And it's a normal practice within aviation, within the airline business. Once you're doing your balance, your budget for the year, you actually hedge and say, okay, you know your routes, you know your frequency for the year, you know your aircraft uptake, you know what the weather might happen. So based on that, plus or minus 10%, you actually hedge your fuel and say, well, marketer ABC, I'm going to, because you can't just stick with one marketer, just ABC, I'll get X number of liters from you for a year at this price. That's actually, you're fronting that marketer, and that actually is good in the marketer's books, and actually helps the marketers set up being able to
with this price fluctuation, is it equally helpful?
It's helpful, but it's a risk as well. It's a risk, the marketers, and it's a risk, and it's algorithms as well. Right. They've done it over the years, so it's not new. You're not reinventing the wheels.
But that doesn't happen with domestic airlines.
Because we don't have the fleet. The biggest domestic airline does not have 50 aircrafts here.
In fact, what's been said to happen now, I recall some of the marketers saying they're being owed millions. I think at some point above 100 million, in fact, for a certain, operator. I recall, in that report, the FCCPC taking the flak for trying to regulate the price. And I know for a lot of operators, it feels good because they're thinking it's a business. Why would you try to cap the price? But don't forget, there are also Nigerians who have to fly. And you know how flying by air is in Nigeria. It's not entirely a luxury. Or is it a luxury? How do you even express that? It's an elitist thing, as some people say, essentially. So if you were to now increase this by, I don't know, 120,000 naira. Yes, you want to meet your operating costs, but would you be able to get people on board that airplane to fly in the first place? So really, would you blame the FCCPC for trying to do its job for the consumers? How about the airlines focus on its own regulators and the people that have the power to broker this deal and ensure it's implemented so that you can have it done right by you as an operator, and then done right by the people as consumers? I hope that makes sense.
It does, but don't forget, the baseline is airline industry in Nigeria has been deregulated. With deregulation comes, see the demand and supply. That's what drives it, essentially. And that's why you see that you have 3 triangular routes, which is Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt. And now, with the new evolution of new airlines, you're actually opening up the secondary routes on secondary airports. With that said, you find out the 120 is just a baseline or a mentioned figure. You find out already we're actually having a negative impact with the reduction in passenger traffic. We've seen that in the last few weeks. Now what's going to happen with the shock now, we're going to see further reduction. And unfortunately, we'll see some airlines go under, which is literally what they're saying about them collapsing. So what we need to now do is find out the economic viability of these airlines and say what would actually be the actual cost of operations. One thing that is sure and has been prevalent prior to this time is the fact that we've actually had lots of underlying financial and operational issues prior to the Ukraine and Russia war.
That's coming off COVID and all of that.
Exactly. COVID, we had 2 years of COVID. We are the first to be impacted. We just imagine of it. Supply chain issues are there. We're just getting out of that. Over and beyond that, in Nigeria, with airline, actually, we have 70% of our operations that are dollarized. Access to Forex is a big issue. We have a lot of domestic airlines that are putting for Forex requests and have not been fulfilled over 2 years. Spares are outside. You actually talk about delays. You actually talk about being able to go send your the pilots and the crew for training. It's all dollarized. We don't have an MRO here.
So is that why, pardon me, there was this talked about coming together of the operators to fix a price, even though it's said that it's against, the regulations having, uniform price. I recall we've had that conversation. So is that the thinking, saying, you know what, we're in this together. How about we just come together and rescue this, which is against the regulations? But, desperate times, they say, calls for desperate measures. So is that the thinking behind this as well? I
don't think your side is what is the right side. I don't think...
Yeah, it's not my side. It's talked about side. I recall we had someone speak about this right there.
Well, the perception is, yes, to fix price. But the Spring Alliance by 6 domestic airlines, it's not to fix price. It's just, there's strength in numbers. There's economics of scale. We're wearing these shoes together. Let's see how we can actually form an alliance to actually ensure that we address issues of mutual interest so that we actually be able to grow the Nigerian aviation sector. Because don't forget, aviation is a great economic catalyst to Nigeria. It's actually contributed to about 0.04% to Nigeria's GDP and is hovering higher to about 0.6%. Okay. And over and beyond that, we have about 104,000 people employed with directly, indirectly, and catalytic to Nigeria's economy. So we are driving the economy from the passenger and the cargo side. So what needs to be done is to ensure that the aviation sector thrives.
Finally, what do you see happening with all of these conversations going on, especially concerning fuel scarcity for the aviation sector? The House of Representatives is talking with those in the executive and the consumer side and regulator side and all of that. So what handshake do you think would help quickly resolve the issue?
I think not working in silos would help, because it's being able to understand what is the ease of doing business in Nigeria. Let's see what the roadmap is, because you mentioned about 3 different entities. Now, it's been able to see working together as Nigerians and see how this is going to affect the traveling public, the government. Don't forget, lots of government or companies already have a fixed travel budget. If it goes over and beyond that, it's going to affect their budget.
All right.
It's going to affect lots of bottom line. So what needs to be done is for everybody to work together and see how are we going to actually ensure what is the best price for the marketer, landing, and transparency.
Okay.
Being able to ensure that transparent, what is the landing cost, what is the most affordable cost to the domestic airline operator, and then we'll be able to share this information and see how we can operate viably in a seamless and commercially viable manner.
Most certainly, this is just one segment of the conversation, and we know that a number of others will happen in the coming days. But for now, we have to thank you very much.
It's always my
for being
pleasure.
part of our program this morning. Tayo Ujuri is aviation consultant and MD Aglo Aviation Support Services. Thank you again for your time.
My pleasure.
So, your contribution to the program, we start with this one by Vitalis Najeze, talking about the Nigerian power sector. Says, aside from the collapse of the national grid, there are more dangerous collapse downstream. NERC, NLC, DISCOs, and other associated organs should revisit the so-called billing methodology being used by DISCOs to suffer the poor masses. It's suicidal for a Nigerian civil servant to receive an estimated bill with monthly due of 18,000 naira and above, bigger than his monthly rent. This most times subject the marketers and all technicians to danger trying to meet up during cash drive on target. Postpaid meters were installed and not read because its CIU aren't functional. This is another system collapse from the DISCOs.
Well, take a look at this tweet from Festus Akimboyewa saying, looking at the condition of our overhead cables, electricity poles, transformers, and other electricity infrastructure, it will be a miracle to get constant electricity in our country. But Nigerians should start to invest in solar power for their homes and businesses. But at what cost, you may ask.
He didn't have that part, Coyote. He didn't put that in, but hey.
Okay, that was mine.
Solid advice, because even the federal government is doing that through the Rural Electrification Agency. Olagunjo Oladele has this one. National grid failure is all administration and bureaucracy sitting on politics. Why electrical power failure, fuel scarcity, ASU, etc. It's all self-imposed failure. The only thing the government will do is to put on a show of APC blaming PDP and PDP blaming APC. I'll take the last one. Henry Okeke has this. The Nigeria consumer cannot be left behind in the global quest for a fair digital economy. There is need for alternative energy. Mass solar system can help while we reactivate consumer rights protection. So quite a number of suggestions around solar. It looks like the federal government will need to take more of its own advice, because it's trying to use that to settle on underserved communities. And these include universities. So let us see what eventually happens, whether the REA will also be coming to urban areas. I know they're usually meant for rural, as it is in their name. But who knows what will happen, gentlemen?
Well, I guess we'll wait to see. And that will change it to UEA. I don't know.
Acronym for my school. Well, thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusuf.
Well, I'm wishing you a power-filled, or do I call it powerful? You get the point. A beautiful day ahead. I'm Kayode Okikulu.
Think good of Nigeria today and do good. I'm Ayo Makine. Have a wonderful day.